Hello, hello, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant, and I thank you for tuning in each and every week, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with myself and my co-hosts, Royce Russell Esquire and Edward Pichardo Esquire. We thank you for tuning in, for sharing this broadcast out, and letting other people know that this is where the legal meets the cultural, where we have the conversations that matter, that we can understand and dissect what we're seeing going on in media, and being able to be educated by two individuals who do this work day in and day out, advocating for justice for our community. So let me go ahead and give them an opportunity to say hello before we dive into today's show, talk about some of the things that are in the headline and what's important to us as a people. So, Señora Eura Pichardo.
Hola, buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Wonderful to be with you here this afternoon today and have you witnessing and listening to our show. As usual, I believe you're going to find it quite fulfilling, entertaining, as well as educational. So welcome.
Gracias. And I was about to say senor, but he's not a senor. Royce Russell Esquire.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a senior. Although AARP keeps on sending me cards, so
Me too.
I need to correct that, right? So everybody can keep their senior status. I'll stay with the junior status. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Speaking Legally. We have some information, obviously, for you as we do every Wednesday. And we're ready to get rocking and rolling because it is going to be packful and powerful.
Absolutely. So there's a lot going on in the news. As we know, there's still conversations about what's happening with this election. I feel like it's the election that never ends, right? That there is constantly conversation about what is going on, who is coming into office, and how this is going to affect the country. And there's still a lot of activity going on in one state in particular around the runoff that's happening in January. So really, what does this mean? Like, everybody's watching it, and I'm concerned that folks have some fatigue. They're tired of this conversation that's still going on. They thought we voted, the people voted, there was a choice, we're getting ready to move into transition. But this particular situation in Georgia is going to impact more than just the election for who is leading our country next. So who wants to jump in and explain just how important this Georgia election is?
Well, basically you have two Senate runoffs that have to take place in Georgia because on election night, none of the candidates in each of the races were able to pass that 50% threshold to avoid a runoff. So what's happening basically is that, like in every other state throughout the country, you have two Senate seats. In Georgia, both seats happen to be up for grabs in this election. And, it's going to be extremely important because I believe right now the Republicans have a 50 to 48 lead in the Senate. They have the majority. If the Democrats are able to get the two seats in the Senate, then they would effectively control the Senate because, of course, the vice president is considered the 51st senator and is able to break any ties a la Kamala Harris. So, it's really big. And what this article right here basically talks about is voter registration. You have people who, the voter registration drive has continued to take place before, during, and after the election to try to get more voters to register and be able to participate in that runoff election. So what the Republicans who are in control of that Georgia government in particular are now trying to do is to create extra obstacles to registration, because there was some talk during the election about some people voting that don't necessarily live in certain states, but yet they had their vote counted. So they're basically, from what I recall in terms of this article, they're discussing these new rules that if you register to vote now, they're gonna try to cross-check that voter registration with whether you have an actual vehicle, car registered, right? Which is kind of odd, because
well, it's not odd. It's very classist, right?
Well, that's what I mean in terms of the classes side of it. Because suppose I'm registering, but I don't happen to have an automobile. What does that say now? Am I now prevented from, registering? I mean, bottom line, the ultimate hope is regardless of these shenanigans, that all of those who participated in the election come back out to vote and cast their vote in numbers, and stop all the nonsense and get these folks into office so we could start changing some of these disastrous policies that were implemented during the 4-year Trump administration. I mean, bottom line is, even outside of this, it seems like slowly but surely the walls are closing in on this man. A lot of these pronouncements about voter fraud are being thoroughly debunked, not only by William Barr himself, the AG, but also you had Chris Krebs on 60 Minutes this past Sunday talking about how, given some of what took place during the previous 2016 election and foreign interference, Trump himself appointed this gentleman to fortify the system. And so one of the things he talked about, and which we talked about the last show, was one of the biggies was, he said during his interview, was he wanted to make sure that every state that was doing electronic voting also had a paper ballot attached to the process. And the reason why that's so important is because, there have been these arguments by the Trumpers saying, oh, there's these computer programs and algorithms, and people who actually voted for Trump had their vote changed electronically. And what Krebs was talking about was that during all of the recounts and all of the audits that took place throughout the country in the various states where, Trump was asking for recounts and or audits, they compared the electronic record to the paper ballot, and they didn't find any discrepancies.
I think that speaks to what we've always said when we think about the criminal justice system and having a jury of your peers and having blind eyes of justice, is that America is built on and should be built on a system of checks and balances, right? Exactly. Everything should be checked and balanced. And so if you have electronic voting and you have the voting system, and then you have the paper ballot, then that's a check and a balance. You have one, you check against the other, it is foolproof. I think overall what we see here, and we should definitely be mindful of this, is that because someone is a Trump appointee, and now this is no way a rule of thumb, but we should be mindful of it. Because someone is appointed by the Trump administration does not mean that they will violate, disintegrate, step on, extinguish every single law that exists thus until this date. You are finding those that have been appointed by Trump or hired by Trump are standing up to the law and saying, yo, no more. Such as the gentleman on 60 Minutes, no more. Such as the federal court judge that struck down his felonious or fictitious claims of fraud in reference to Philadelphia and in reference to Georgia. These are Trump appointees. Remember, district courts, there were plenty of vacancies in the district court. A lot of Trump supporters were voted into those positions or appointed in those positions. And now that they have them, I don't know if they're showing their true colors or they're just upholding the law as they swore to do. And they're saying no go. And this gentleman, Trump is used to firing people, but he vouches for and says, look, we created the best system that you can have. And you take the computer and you take the paper and you have your checks and you have your balance, and it's time for you to bounce.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, they just can't seem to be able to find a place or a court that they've been able to provide actual evidence of voter fraud. And now, many Republicans are now starting to say, now we can't We can't continue to go along with the party line to their own detriment, by the way, because, you know, the actual Trump supporters on the ground, apparently some of them have issued threats against these individuals for not just, you know, for not somehow acting unilaterally in violation of the law and just acting.
You know what's amazing? What's amazing about that is, right? Look, it's totally wrong. You shouldn't be threatening anybody, right? But once again, I'm gonna make this analogy to when folks of color and everybody else in America were being stopped at the airport and asked to be checked left and right. People of color was like, hey, look, I don't mind the small inconvenience. I mean, I've been inconvenienced all my life. They've been checking me upright and sideways, but the small inconvenience in order to make sure we have a safe flight is something that I will endure. You put the civil rights aside. Majority of folks, not people of color, was flabbergasted. Was, are you kidding me? I have to take off this. I have to take off that. I have to do all these things because they were not used to that type of treatment. And they didn't want to give up that small liberty, even though it was their safety. Analogy. You have those that support Trump in the street. They're like, we're not giving this up. We're going to threaten you. We're going to do whatever, right? Those people that are being threatened, they are majority white people, right? They're astonished. They're flabbergasted. They're like, oh my God, they're threatening me. Meanwhile, on the other spectrum, you got a guy like Danny Green, who's African American. He missed a 3-point jump shot in the Lakers game. He's receiving death threats like you wouldn't believe. He's shrugging it off like it ain't no biggie. Like, yeah, you know, this is the territory. I better make the 3-point shot next week, you know? And so, you know, I say it with some levity, but it goes to, you know, the shock value that certain communities can absorb, withstand, put it in its prospective place, and other communities cannot. And it becomes news. And it's like, that's no news. You know what I'm saying? Let's move on. Do your job and keep it moving. And, you know, you have to, I want to say one other thing. You said the party, right? The party. Clearly, there must have been a party because one of the briefs that Trump's legal team submitted had all type of typos. You know
yes.
Right. So there must have been a party when she was typing it because the wine must have got the worst of the mind because it was filled with typos. And clearly, when you look at Giuliani, he must have been partying too because the dye is coming down on the side of his face. I mean, it's just a litany of what is it, buffoonery? You know, I mean, just going on. It's just like have to be kidding me.
And now you got this situation where, you know, you have an investigation apparently taking place of money being funneled through a political action committee to pay for presidential pardons in the waning days of the Trump administration. You know, after you had this recent Trump pardon of Michael Flynn, and you know, it's amazing that, you know, you have this idea of people lining up to spend money to try to get pardoned.
So before we're going to jump into that because that's just crazy to me. What's more concerning is that we have people in this country who are believing some of these twisted narratives. So it's causing a lot of tension in the street. We know we believe the truth and know the truth as the truth, but the truth is being skewed, and people who aren't willing to do the extra research to find out the truth, they're believing the tweets. They're believing these rallies. They're believing like, oh, something was really wrong. You know, it's questioning our government, and it's really challenging our democracy. The whole world is looking at us. Like, what are they doing when we're so quick to correct everybody else and how they run their government? So what he's doing is damaging. And I think to your point earlier, Republicans are like, yo, hold on, wait a minute. We didn't sign up for this. Like, you're taking it too far now. We have a process. There's a peaceful transition of power. There shouldn't be all this obstruction to transition. So they're getting upset because they realize it's going out the gate now. And there are a lot of people who haven't been educated properly on what really happened that are believing the lies and are causing unnecessary drama and contention in our streets. So I'm concerned about what's going to happen in these next couple of weeks. It's a long time for January 20th.
Well, I can tell you, man, ignorance is like the firstborn, and common sense is like being an orphan. And what I mean by that is when you're the firstborn, everybody loves you. Everybody wants to be around you. And that's what ignorance is. And common sense, we all know, ain't so common. So it is often treated like an orphan because you can't find it when you need it. And these are the same folks that when they see instances of police brutality, excessive force, they say, oh, he must have done something wrong, right? So it's not mind-boggling that they believe in these fake news, these outlandish tweets. We're doing our job to extinguish them, but it's going to be there, and at some point we can't give it the attention because you can't have an argument if only one person is talking.
Mm-hmm. And it's also amazing, because I want to go back quickly to that Krebs interview. He also talked about how the mail-in ballot scheme made the election even more secure because in terms of that mail-in ballot, that was something that you look at that person's voter registration, you say, okay, we have an address for that individual, we're going to send it to that address, and then when we get it back, these documents have their barcodes and all that, so it was even more secure, in terms of them being able to link the vote to the individual, because a lot of this hoopla that's been going on about an unfair election and voter fraud had to do with this idea of how dare you allow anyone to cast their vote by mail, which this is not the first time this has happened, and even the president himself previously voted by mail-in, but neither here nor there. But a lot of this surrounds this idea of, well, us allowing people to vote by mail versus them having to physically come to the voting place, and even that has been thoroughly debunked. This idea that somebody could maybe create a ballot on their own and mail it in. I mean, it's
crazy.
I think on every level this is being debunked. Unfortunately, a lot of misinformation is getting out there. One thing we that was refreshing was that I believe Facebook in the weeks leading up to the election decided to start, and I believe Twitter started labeling certain communications as not true, something like that. They were placing certain labels to tamp down on the rampant misinformation that was disseminated during the 2016 election. And then even still, you got the misinformation still getting out there, and a lot of conservatives and right wingers trying to steer people to some other platform where you don't have all of these restrictions. And they're kind of, using the First Amendment as, our right to speech is being, inhibited and tampered. I mean, it's all just really amazing.
All of it is fertile ground for legal arguments and suit, and it's testing the waters, as you say, of freedom of speech, and it's testing the waters, as Kevin just posted, fact checking. When you have the worldwide internet, as they say, there's always going to be stuff that is misleading, but I think the essence of the person will gravitate to the social media outlet that they align themselves with. I mean, you have to be really a truth teller and finder to take all the information and make an objective opinion versus this is my opinion. Let me look at media and social outlets that support my opinion, right? So when you look at terrorists don't look at every single site. They look at sites that support their belief, that helps them enhance their viewpoint as far as terrorism is concerned. And I just think that we need to understand that, because if I like black as a color, I'm shopping for things that are black, and I think that's where it all starts. And, I think the other week we had something that said, I think Jason put down a hashtag justice fatigue. We got hashtag tired of talking about Trump. So we
we are, I mean, you know, he's masterful in keeping himself getting the attention that he so needs for his true narcissistic behavior. But hey, Richard, Kevin, Stephanie, good to see you. Thank you all for tuning in. And before we jump off of this, one last piece that, you know, Mr. Pichardo has shared with us about the Justice Department investigating potential presidential pardon bribery scheme. Really? I'm so shocked.
Yeah, well, you know, this has been a very transactional presidency, as you will. And so, you know, when I saw this, I wasn't surprised. I suspected that, you know, something was going to be coming out in terms of some possibilities of turning this presidential pardon into a commodity. You know, let's hope
circus,
you know, this doesn't necessarily bear out. This article contains a litany of provisos in terms of, well, no current government official is being named or investigated, you know, so who knows where this is going to go. You know, I would imagine there's some disarray in some of the closing days of this administration within the Department of Justice itself. Apparently this investigation is coming out of the DC portion of it. You know, who knows? Let's see what happens. I'm just glad that at least, you know, it's coming out and people are becoming aware of the possibility of this, because, you know, it's just dangerous for our democracy. This is going to further erode people's confidence in government. And when people no longer believe in government, they start behaving in ways that really undermines the girding of our democracy, you know.
And I also think that it is a very fertile ground to play what I call a 3-card Monte. You focus on one thing, but meanwhile, the chips are moving some other place. So we're focused on election, but meanwhile, you have issues before Supreme Courts that are policy trending and making in reference to immigrants, in reference to immigrant status. And Dr. Grant, we had this conversation earlier. I mean, let's point right to it. You know, we were talking about DACA, which is, you know, the deferred action for childhood arrivals, and that is, you know, grounds that and subject matter that was taking place and talked about during the elections, just before the elections, and the Supreme Court has overruled or struck down Trump's attempt, and not attempt, but actually ceasing the DACA renewals and new applicants, stating that it's against the law, it's illegal. And so now the Obama 2012 DACA policy is back in place. And I just like to spend some time to really talk through it and talk about it. As this article says, Letitia James, the Attorney General in New York, agrees with it. And, you know, for those who are not aware of it, hey, speaking legally, where the culture and the legal comes hand in hand, we're going to give you a little information about it. So if I may, let me just go into some of the criteria of DACA. So once again, I will say this, everybody has an opinion. Everybody can make up their mind as to what they believe and what they don't believe, but these are facts. And to support that, you're speaking to and you're listening to someone that worked for the Department of Justice, Immigration Division, was a trial attorney there that helped deported numerous of people, you know, on Interpol, convicted of crimes here illegally, and now has been on the other side, making sure that people of color stay in the country by adjustment of status, by temporary protective status, and by DACA and various other means. So this is not something that we're just pulling out of the hat. We have tested, tried, and we're foolproof with this. So when we talk about DACA, what does it mean? Once again, it's deferred actions for childhood arrivals. And it really refers to a small, well, not necessarily a small group, but a sector of our community. And so that is people that are under the age of 31 years of age, on or before June 15, 2012. You had to have come into the United States before your 16th birthday. You had to stay and have been in the United States continuously. That means no vacations outside of the country. You have not left. You have stayed in the United States from the time you got here up until the time that you apply. And then we could talk about after you apply. That you were physically present in the United States on June the 15th, 2012. That means you can't apply abroad and then try to come in the country. It goes against the criteria and rules. You have no legal status. That means you're not a legal permanent resident. You're not what we call already have some deferred status from being removed. Whether you're a temporary protected status, you don't have that. You have no status at all. And you graduated school. You graduated either high school, got a GED, you're in college, you're in school somewhere along the totem pole, grammar school, junior high school, college, associate degree, you're in school, you have a GED, as I said, or you receive honorable discharge from the armed forces or the Coast Guards. And also, which hopefully we don't run into when you're applying for DACA, you can't have any felony convictions. And what's more important, people say, oh, yes, I don't have any felony convictions. But there's an or 3 misdemeanors, or a significant misdemeanor. So now let me break that down. We know what felony convictions are. If you don't know, that's where you charged with a crime, you can spend more than a year in jail. Robbery, rapes, assault in the first degree, manslaughter, certain possessions of drug charges of illegal controlled substance, carrying a weapon illegally, selling of drugs. We know those. We know them when we see it. Assaults. Misdemeanors, anything that's a year or less. So a simple assault. Maybe hopping a train fare, which now has been deemed a violation, but you may have had that in your past before the law was implemented where it is not considered a crime. Simple possession of marijuana, if you plead guilty to something like that. 3 or more misdemeanors. Now, what is interesting is this area called significant misdemeanors. What is a significant misdemeanor? Is a significant misdemeanor me punching someone in the face? Is that a significant misdemeanor? Is a significant misdemeanor jumping out of a cab, theft for services? Is that a significant misdemeanor? I would have to say, given my experience, a significant misdemeanor would be anything that's on the domestic violence totem pole that does not reach a felony. Anything that's on the violent totem pole that does not reach a felony status. That, to me, would consider a significant misdemeanor. So if you have all the other criteria under the age of 31 as of June 15, 2012, came into the United States before your 16th birthday, in school or graduated or have a GED or honorable discharge from the armed forces or Coast Guard, physically present in the United States at the time you apply, continuously in the United States while you are here, if you fall short of that criminal aspect, then you are not eligible. And so let's be clear. What DACA does, it does exactly what it says. It's a deferred action. That means you don't necessarily have legal status. It just means that United States is not going to enforce what they could enforce against you. Just like temporary protective status for those that come from Guatemala or some other countries that are suffering from some environmental effects or some civil war. We're not removing you. You're not a legal permanent resident. You're not a U.S. citizen. We're just deferring. And what that allows you to do is then eventually adjust your status to become a U.S. citizen at some point. And I know you had mentioned, Ed, about it's not a pathway. So, and we'll continue, but go ahead. I want you to jump in on that.
Well, I just want to offer something to the Latin community. Esta parte de nuestro show es bien importante porque estamos hablando del programa DACA, que es el programa para gentes que llegaron al Estados Unidos antes de la edad de 16 años y que no son residentes o ciudadanos del país. Y durante la administración de Trump, él trató de parar el programa. pero recientemente la Corte Suprema decidió que el pago del programa fue ilegal y ahora el programa sigue de nuevo y ahora se pueden aceptar aplicaciones para ese programa y para determinar si alguien es elegible para el programa, como mencioné, la persona tenía que haber llegado de la edad de 16 o antes, no 17, 16 o menos, de edad, no podía salir del país en ningún tiempo, tenía que permanecer en el Estados Unidos durante el tiempo entero antes de la aplicación, no puede tener ninguna felonias en sus récords o 3 delitos menores en su récord o un delito que es considerado violento o de importancia. So, quería darle ese punto a la comunidad latina porque nosotros conocemos mucha gente que llegaron a este país a través de su padre o un adulto y han estado aquí. Y también uno tiene que graduarse de la secundaria, está en escuela ahora mismo, conseguido una diploma equivalente o había participado y descargado honorablemente de las Fuerzas Armadas. O vamos a decir, si esta es una persona joven, antes o tienen que ser de la edad 31 o menos, y si han servido en la Fuerza Armada, vamos a decir el ejército, y fueron descargados honorablemente, pues también son elegibles para el programa. So, es importante para la comunidad latina saber que este es algo que sucedió recientemente, que es de mucha importancia. I just was explaining that this is, really big, a really big one for the Latin community in terms of this development. And I spoke about some of the eligibility requirements that you discussed. I think it's important to mention that, like you mentioned, this is not a pathway to citizenship. This was basically a compromise by the Obama administration because they were actually trying to pass the DREAM Act, which did provide a path to citizenship for these young people, but it couldn't get through the Senate. And then at one point, there was a bill that was passed for the Senate, but didn't get through in the House. And so, that's why, circling back, it's important that we get these 2 senators in from Georgia so that, we can resolve this issue of these young people being in this limbo status for hopefully once and for all.
And one of the things that I wanted to add while you were speaking to the Latino community, and I was thinking about what is a significant misdemeanor. And I realized that a significant misdemeanor could be any type of threat to national safety or any type of threat to public safety. Now, why is that relevant? That's relevant because we're in a time of protest. We're in a time where folks are asserting themselves. So I can see a scenario where someone from, and not only the Latin community, but any community, the West Indian community, any community, who are here illegally participating in these protests, may not know that they're DACA eligible, get arrested, they're resisting arrest, and this may be their 3rd misdemeanor. And I can see someone that works for INS, Immigration Services, as a trial attorney, given this administration, trying to couch that as public safety concern. Now, you say, well, gosh, he's wrestling with the police and they're talking about violence or they're talking about the vote. How can that be a public safety concern? Well, we look at this past summer. It wasn't too long ago that a lawyer was arrested with his girlfriend or significant other for throwing a bottle inflamed at a police car at a store, right? So you take those actions, you take what the protest is about, and that is a very good argument from the government perspective to say that this person may not meet the criteria of DACA. Now, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be out there because I want you out there. But I am suggesting that you have to look at these things in totality and how you can position yourself and what one may or may not do if they're able to push you in a direction. And one of the things that was the catalyst and was the motivation for DACA was, one, the DREAM Act and the frustration of not having a pathway to citizenship, but also was having these individuals that were 31 years of age on or before June 15th. So that means 2012. They could be older, they just on or before June 15th, they're 31, or younger, who are in the workforce illegally. And what DACA did, it allowed you to have an employment authorization card so you could actually work freely and actually pay taxes and actually do the right things, because most immigrants wanted to do the right things. And so if you can share that in Spanish, I think that would be helpful and impactful.
And then we have a question after that, Ed.
Well, you know, otra razón por qué esto es tan importante es que cuando el programa estaba activo, el DACA program también le daba la oportunidad a muchos de estos individuos conseguir una tarjeta de autorización para ser empleado. So, eso quería decir que aunque tú no eras ciudadano tenías residencia permanente, tú en que sea podías trabajar. Y eso era grande porque así uno se puede mantener uno mismo. So, you know, si Dios quiere, cuando la implementación regrese de nuevo con lo que sucedió en la corte, vamos a poder empezar ese proceso de nuevo. So, el señor Restrazo quería mencionar al abogado que eso era algo importante en este aspecto también.
And it's nothing like having someone that has had immigration status or no status working and feeling like they can contribute. That is ultimately important. And just before we go to the question, Dr. Grant, let me just say one more thing. And Ed, if you could translate, then we'll go to the question, because I don't want it to get lost. That it also allowed you to apply for what they call advanced parole. And let me define that. What advanced parole is that if you have a DACA application in and you're approved, it will allow you to apply for advanced parole, which is no cost. And what advanced parole does is allow you to go back home to your home country for a period of time. Let's say from 6 months, 5 weeks. You can go home and actually come back into the United States and maintain that deferred status. And that is huge. So you're working, you got deferred status, and you can go back home and come back. That's a big home run.
Ajá, so lo que el abogado también está hablando es que uno de las cosas más grandes también con este programa es que después que te aceptaban en el programa, también uno tenía el derecho de aplicar para uno poder visitar su país de origen. So vamos a decir, tú has estado aquí todo este tiempo con miedo de regresar a tu país, se te han enfermado familiares o se han muerto, o tú no has visto tus primos o tu gente o tus familiares en tanto tiempo. Después que te aceptaban en el programa, tú podías pedir permiso para poder ir a visitar y no tener ese miedo de cuando tú regreses al país no poder entrar. Eso era grande de este programa también. So, ponte a pensar, tú estás trabajando, cualquier acción de removimiento está parado, y también tú puedes pedir para poder visitar tu país. Eso era otra parte grande de este programa.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing that. We have a couple of questions, and thank you, Stephanie. Yes, we are here where the legal meets the cultural. Every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. You can catch the replays on our Destiny Designers TV channel. But Kevin had a question. He said, do Cubans still have the one dry foot rule as it relates to immigration status?
Well, that has been revamped in so many ways, and the answer is gray. The answer is truly gray. I wish I can give you more of a secured answer, but you are pulling rules and a philosophy and a policy that has I wouldn't say has faded away, but I haven't seen anyone try to use that as a form of relief in a very, very long time. So I actually don't know. And what I mean as a form of relief for those that are listening is that if you ever put in what they call exclusion or removal proceedings, that means they want to remove you from the United States or exclude you from the United States. There are a variety of ways that you can try to defeat that. One is DACA, temporary TPS, temporary protection status, asylum. that you're running from some type of political or civil war from a country, cancellation of removal, meaning that you've been in the country over 10 years and you have a legal permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, that if you were to leave the country or forced out of the country, they will suffer extreme emotional distress. And we can talk about all these things in the upcoming shows. Or you can adjust your status by way of marriage or by way of someone that is a U.S. citizen. That means immediate family member, mother, father, sister, brother, son or daughter, apply for you. And while that application is pending, your status is stayed until you go through the adjustment of status and become a legal permanent resident. So hopefully that answers some of his questions.
Now, Roy, speaking on the gentleman's topic, I thought when it came to that one dry foot rule, it really applied to the asylum applications by these types of individuals, because they were deemed to have arrived from certain countries that were so hostile or persecutory that they were automatically deemed to be in danger of political persecution if they were forced to return to their country of origin. In this case, Cuba, and I think there were other countries that fell into that category, possibly now like Venezuela, since it's deemed.
What has happened in place of that is that there is no automatic. So you could just, if that's what Kevin is referring to, I don't want to say Kevin is showing his age, but he might be squeaking out. He might be squeaking out a little something, or he's a historian, one or the other. That doesn't really exist, right? So it doesn't exist. What happens is you come in, you apply for asylum, and what they have is the human rights reports that will give you the outline of the country and what are the hot spots, whether it's a country that persecute based upon religion, Christianity, or being a Muslim, or whether there's civil war and unrest, and then you go from there. So there's nothing that's automatic. There is a litmus test. Oh yeah, automatic. There is a litmus test, and you can share it. I'm not going to share it, but the litmus test for which you have to hurdle. And you're correct, but that is the test that they have to do.
So thank you for that. And Stephanie wants to know, is this something that is well known by those that apply for DACA? All of what you were relating, she wanted to know, how well dispersed is this information? Do people know? And I think that's a great question when we talk about where the legal meets the cultural and how we can use the content that we share on this show to empower our communities. How widespread are all the criteria and eligibility for DACA shared in our communities?
Well, it's probably not well known. One thing about the immigration field of law, and this is not discrediting anyone, you don't have to be a lawyer to practice in this area. You could be a certified representative. That means you've done enough immigration work that you don't have to be a lawyer. There are a lot of charitable organizations that endeavor in this field. A lot of the forms of relief, such as DACA, TPS, the cancellation of removal, political asylum, you go down the list, are very factual sensitive. And you just have to be a thinker to really grab hold of it. And you have to make a conscious effort to talk about a subject matter pertaining to immigration, because immigration is so broad. It's almost like the tax code is forever changing. There are many ways to get to the finish line, which is the path to citizenship. Although there are many ways, all those routes have different turns and obstacles and rest areas and food areas. If you're driving, we can make that analogy. And it just depends upon your particular situation. Now, one of the things that no one has said, but I'll put it out there, filing for DACA, you have to use the form 821D, and it's for free. So there's no cost to it. However, the cost is incurred when you apply for an employment authorization card. Your employment authorization card, EAD, is where you have to pay, and you have to pay $410. And then you have to pay an additional $85 for your biometrics. And Ed, I'll let you explain it once again to the Latino community, but I'll make this one last point. Biometrics is critical because that is where they take your fingerprints, and that is where your criminal history may come up if you have one. So that's the fees, and that's what you need to do to move forward.
Ajá, el abogado quería explicar que la aplicación para DACA es gratis, pero donde hay un costo es cuando uno aplica para su tarjeta para autorización de ser empleado o empleamiento. Y ahí esa aplicación cuesta como $410 y después uno también tiene que pagar como $85 para sus biométricos, que tiene que ver con su huella digital y todo. Y ahí es que ellos usan esa información para ver si uno tiene un récord, una historia, un récord criminal. Y ahí es que llega el costo de este proceso. Pero la aplicación inicial es gratis. I also wanted to mention that I know, being Latino Hispanic, that on the Latino news outlets, they do spend significant amounts of time talking about things like DACA and eligibility. So in terms of the knowledge base within the Latino community, it might be a little different than, some other communities in terms of, the information that gets out there. I often have my mom talk about some of this stuff without me even soliciting it from her in terms of, some of these topics, because it is a topic of discussion amongst many Latinos. So in terms of the awareness of this program and its eligibility requirements, I would imagine that there is some knowledge of such,
And I just want to make sure that when we look at the Supreme Court's ruling, and I'll just go a list of some of the things that I wrote down, so folks who would chime in at the last moment, they can have an understanding and they can go back. The court allows for new applicants. It allows for people to renew their application. The court rulings reopened advanced parole, once again, having the ability to go home and come back when you have DACA status. The courts also restored, once again, like I said, the Obama 2012 policy for DACA and the program. And as to Ed's point, if the Democrats reach the majority in the Senate, and if Biden wants to expand DACA, he will have the power to expand it to other, let's say, categories for which one could be eligible. Maybe it's not 31 years of age. Maybe it's 35 years of age. Maybe it's not come in at June 15, 2012. Maybe, you can come in after that. And maybe it can become a pathway to citizenship, pathway to legal permanent residency. That means getting your green card. And maybe there has to be some other criteria that you have to fill out or meet in order to do such. But it is a great talking point. And once again, it is an example of, although they may be Trump appointees in various positions, that people are holding steadfast to what is right and what is wrong, and moving and pushing the envelope, and then rock up the hill, despite the rhetoric that we hear in tweets and we hear in the news, whether it's Fox 5 or some other station.
Well, what I would say is we still kind of need that legislative solution to this dilemma, because even when Obama was trying to expand the program, he was met with several lawsuits dealing with the actual legality and constitutionality of what he was doing, and I believe it ended up in a stalemate Supreme Court right when Scalia died, with a 4-4 tie, deciding on whether or not those injunctions stopping him from expanding were right or wrong. And then at that point, it wasn't decided further after that until we got a decision recently about him trying to rescind the existing program. Either way, I really hope that these two senators get in play so we can actually get some legislation in there. Because what happens a lot of times is if you have something like DACA, which is really the creature of an executive order, it depends in many cases on whether or not who is in the White House at the time and whether they're going to continue the program or rescind it. In the case of Trump, quite frankly, what ended up happening there was that his efforts at rescinding the program were found to be arbitrary and capricious and in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. And for some of you that don't understand that, what happens is any sort of governmental action has to be done in a way that's not found to be arbitrary or, just done off the cuff. The process has to be followed. There's notification periods. There are comment periods that are allowed whenever you're trying to change something administratively. And so, and if many of you will recall when, Trump first got into office, he would, just say some really off the cuff, crazy stuff about, removing Muslims, that all these Latino immigrants were criminals and so forth. Very, arbitrary conduct. And thankfully, a lot of that was taken into consideration and I believe led to this Supreme Court ruling against the Trump administration.
And so and with that note, now we can circle back and once again see how important, right, Georgia is, because we like to circle back, right, see how important Georgia is. And although we have hashtag tired of talking about Trump, it is his chaotic mindset and disavowing programs that are helpful to the country, right? You want to talk about criminalizing immigrants. You have biometrics, which makes sure that doesn't happen and that there's a checks and balance. You have situations where folks can be productive part of society so they can feel wanted. And you can't tell me America doesn't want their tax-paying dollars, right?
Hey, Royce, if I may, brother, my understanding was there was actually a study showing that, the tax rolls were improved by all of the recipients being able to legally work and pay taxes and contribute economically to their communities. It's just amazing. It just is.
Well, it's amazing that anybody would think otherwise, right? I've never seen America do anything that doesn't benefit them financially. And even on the moral end, it still benefits them morally and financially. But I'll let the media do what the media do, and we do the research that we need to do, and that's what we're all about.
Absolutely. But before we, I've showed some information that folks can go and see. You talked about the card, and this is the biometrics. This is all the information that you get here at Speaking Legally, so you can understand what's going on. And I just want you to talk through. A lot of people just think it's our Latin brothers and sisters that deal with DACA.
Oh, no, by no means.
No.
Brothers from the West Indies, brothers from the Ivory Coast, you name it. It's universal. It's just that we're so fortunate to have my Dominican brother here on the show that can give the information to that community. If unfortunately I've been so Americanized, because remember, folks of color, it wasn't unusual for us to have 5 languages under our belt. People that come from Africa and look at us and like, we're weird. You only know 1 language? Like, what's wrong with you? So we just speak to it because we have an audience, but it applies to everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to run into a number of young people in the criminal justice system who were actually, from the English speaking, what they call the West Indian Caribbean, who had come to the country and for one reason or another never became residents, came in as children, were now adults, no status, and found themselves in a particular pickle. And, these are young people that if they were to be deported and sent back to these countries, they would be absolutely lost because many of them came here age of 5, 7, 10 years old. In some cases, almost all the family is here in the U.S. and and if they're sent down there, it's they're sure to meet some desperate circumstances. I mean, it's rather tragic, because at the end of the day, I think all of us, regardless of our race, color, or creed or religion, agree that children, for the most part, are innocent. And if you have a child being brought somewhere, for you to say, okay, well, according to the law, we got to send you back, and that child is looking at you like, send me back to what? What are you talking about? I mean, one of the saddest parts of this administration was this separation of parents policy at the border, children sitting in immigration courts, not understanding at all what's going on, no parents, no relatives. I mean, it's just tragic.
Unconscionable. As a mother, I cannot even imagine. And the fact that they still can't locate and connect back these children with their families, it's unconscionable. Like I that just made me, beyond all the other things that have disappointed in the past 4 years, you take away children from their parents, from their mother. What? Like, and then feel like you're justified in doing it. I mean, that's a whole nother show. We're at the top of the hour, and my pressure is rising as we talk about this, because that's a whole.
Let me just say that, like we said before, DACA is a deferred status. And what are you deferring to? You're deferring for other legislation to hopefully help you out. You're deferring to what I call taking human bites and living for another day. And so what do I mean by that? You're here. You're under the age 31 at the time. You're 16, 17, 18. Maybe you're 29. Maybe, you're 30. And this is a way to defer your status. And this is the way, to adjust your status if you find the right one and happen to get married. Or if there is a loved one that is a citizen that's in your immediate family and they're able to petition for you, despite the fact that you may have aged out. That means you've reached the age 21 to be able to be filed by your parents as a child. So there's a variety of things that DACA does for you in reference to deferring your status. And, as most things with immigration, if it's never touched, then you never have a problem with it, right? You just keep on reapplying. You don't age out. You just keep on reapplying until somebody wants to poke the bear and, like you said, and want to redo the history books. And thank God that we've had lawyers and other activists and people from ALA, the Immigration Law Association, that steps in that says, look, we're going to fight this to the end. And we need to join in those protests as those who are immigrants join in the protests that has happened in the past couple of months.
Absolutely. There's more work to be done. That's the moral to the story. But I'm so glad that you all have shared this education. And thank you, Stephanie, for joining in. Hope you come back to Speaking Legally. Thank you to all of our listeners. John, welcome to the show. Sonia, thank you for your continued support. Richard, Kevin, appreciate all of you, and share this information. If you want to catch the replays to the content that we've shared, you can view it on the Facebook pages of either of us, as well as Destiny Designers TV on YouTube. We have the whole playlist for Speaking Legally. So thank you so much. We hope that everyone enjoyed a safe Thanksgiving. I meant to say that at the beginning of the show, but every day is a day to give thanks, and some of us don't celebrate it the same way. But in the spirit of harvest and the spirit of gratitude, we want to respect the indigenous of this country as well. And we hope that everyone just continues to stay safe. We know that the numbers are going up again. I mean, that's also sadly like a repeat story over and over again in the news, but COVID-19 did not disappear. So just be mindful, use wisdom on how you govern your own home to protect yourself, to protect your loved ones, and just to be safe. And prayerfully, we don't see what they're claiming is an upsurge in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for tuning in once again. Speaking Legally, Mr. Russell, Mr. Pichardo, do you want to say any final words before we close out?
Well, I hope to see everybody next Wednesday so we can hit another subject matter and do what we do.
Yes, and I just want to say farewell to everyone. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found this show to be educational and fulfilling. Take care.
All right, everyone. See you next week.